Imagine this scenario. You are sitting on a beach, staring out into the ocean. You can feel the cool breeze of a September afternoon spent on the warm sands of the Mediterranean. Then you see a vast fleet of ships on the horizon, heading straight for you. These are the enemies of Greece, barreling directly towards your position and your homeland. It is genuinely chilling to imagine it, yet this scene has likely played out time and time again throughout the entirety of human history. Greetings, my friends, and welcome to the channel. I'm your host, Hadrian. In this episode, we will explore the Battle of Marathon, one of the most important and critical struggles in all of human history. Now, I will attempt to be objective and tell the story from both angles, but as with every empire in the history of the world, the Persians did not dwell on their defeats, and the Greeks, flush with victory, certainly embellished their telling of that monumental day. We will explore the events that led to the battle, the engagement itself, and the aftermath that laid the foundation for Western civilization. Let's get into it. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was in its day the largest empire in the history of the world, stretching from the borders of India in the east to Egypt and all the way to the Aegean Sea. The vast empire was built by the Shah-in-Shah, or King of Kings, Cyrus the Great. It was a powerhouse of the ancient world. In the years 499 to 493 BCE, the furthest western reaches of the empire, a collection of Greek city-states known as the Ionian Greeks, began waging a war for their freedom. The revolt eventually climaxed with the sacking of the city of Sardis. The king of the Persians at this time was Darius I. When the revolt was put down, the Persians learned of the outside help the Ionian Greeks had been receiving from their fellow Greek city-states in the west on the Greek mainland. Athens and Eretria had sent help to the Ionians, intent on aiding their brothers and sisters break free from the Persian yoke, but also, likely, they were concerned that eventually the empire would reach their own shores, and they were understandably concerned for their own safety. Darius learned of this, and he was understandably outraged, going as far as to have a slave tell him 3 times every night before his dinner to remember the Athenians, according to the historian Herodotus. This challenge to Darius and his empire could not go unpunished, lest it spread like wildfire throughout his empire. So, in the year 490 BCE, the Persians carefully laid their planning. A massive fleet of 600 triremes, 200 supply ships, and 50 horse transports was put to sea with a naval crew of nearly 100,000 sailors. The goal of this invasion was twofold: to subjugate any Greek city-states that they could and were able to find, but also to seek revenge on both Eretria and Athens for their insolence and their interference in Persian affairs. Embarked on those ships was 25,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry, ready for war. Crossing the Aegean Sea, they headed towards Eretria, the first of the 2 enemy states that would feel the wrath of Darius and his empire. En route to Eretria, they island hopped from island to island, reaching the city of Naxos, which attempted to resist them. This city was burned to the ground, and its surviving population was taken as slaves. Next, the Persians sailed to the island of Delos, which surrendered almost immediately to Darius' forces. The message was clear: if you surrendered, you would be spared. If you resisted, you would be destroyed. Next, the Persian fleet continued west towards the first of its main goals, the city of Eretria. The city was sacked and burned to the ground, survivors sold into slavery. It was then that the Persian fleet headed south towards Athens and its destiny. The Persian fleet made landfall 40 kilometers northeast of Athens, on the beaches of Marathon, and began to disembark their ships for the coming campaign. The Athenians were caught off guard, and they rushed their forces north, calling for aid from the city of Plataea in the west. They well understood that left unchallenged, the Persians would quickly overwhelm the countryside as they spread inland, and they needed to be stopped. 10,000 Athenians and 1,000 Plataeans united and marched towards the beaches in a desperate attempt to stop the Persian invasion before it took root. Reaching the beaches of Marathon, the Greek army quickly set about blocking the way inland. While they held a strong position, it quickly became clear that they stood not only at a huge numerical disadvantage, but also one of arms. They had no cavalry, no archers, and the Persians had both. Desperate, the Athenians sent for help, sending dispatches south to Sparta, calling for aid. Sparta, masters of war, were eager to help and come to the aid of the Athenians, but first they had to complete a religious festival, which was still in progress and could not be halted without offending the gods. They would send help, but it would be at least 10 days for them to arrive. The Athenians and the Plataeans were on their own. Both sides dug in, unwilling to fight, the Greeks waiting for help from a strongly held position, and the Persians waiting for a favorable opening to present itself. Thus, a standoff began that lasted for 8 days. The Athenians could retreat and seek safety within their own walls, but the fear of a strong pro-Persian opposition within their own city led the army to fear that a siege may likely be ended in treachery or worse. 8 days the two armies stood across from each other, unwilling to take action. The Athenians knew that the Spartans were coming. Each hour that they waited brought the promise of Spartan aid. The Persians, however, had issue of provisions, namely food. Each day that passed saw their supplies dwindling. Historians, both modern and ancient, have no idea what eventually broke this stalemate. We do know two things: that the Persian cavalry was absent from the battle, and we know for certain that it was the Greeks who were the aggressors. It is possible that the Persian cavalry was off foraging for supplies. It is also equally as possible that they had been re-embarked on the ships. Perhaps they were to be moved elsewhere, maybe towards the city of Athens itself, or maybe they were preparing to leave. It's really impossible for us to know, but likely emboldened by this missing cavalry, the Greeks saw their chance and elected to take it. Perhaps they felt that the city was threatened. Perhaps this is the reason that they felt forced to act. We'll never know. What we do know is something caused them to feel that the time to act had come, and so they chose to move. Even without the cavalry, the Persian army was a formidable force. Still vastly outnumbering the Greeks, their commander Miltiades stretched out the Greek line, making his center thin and matching the length of the Persian forces that opposed them. This would keep the Greeks from being enveloped by the larger enemy force on both sides. The Greeks marched forwards in unison towards the Persian lines. Their steady, rhythmic march pressed down towards the Persian position, foot by foot, until it reached the range of the Persian archers. Then, the Greeks stunned the Persians by breaking into a full charge for the last 200 meters, horrifying their enemy and thrusting towards them with their deadly phalanx spears. With their large shields and heavy armor, the archers had little effect on the Greek attackers. The Greeks closed the last distance and reached melee range. The Persians began to push back the center, thinner ranks. Feeling exalted and likely feeling that the battle was going their way, they pressed forwards, not realizing that the much stronger right and left wings of the army had not given ground. This caused the Persians to march forwards until they found themselves nearly surrounded by this error in judgment. The flanks, on both the left and the right, routed, and the Athenians were then able to turn towards the exposed sides of the Persian army. Understandably terrified, the Persian army collapsed, desperate to flee from the field and seek safety. Those who did not die by the spear or by the sword faced a new horror, the ocean, as they attempted to re-embark on the nearby waiting fleet. The Greeks had done the impossible. They had defeated the greatest empire in the world, an army that outnumbered them 2-1, in a stunning reversal, halting the invasion in its tracks. 6,400 Persians died in the fighting, with only 192 Athenians and 11 Plataeans perishing in the battle, if you believe the sources. In either case, this was a massive lopsided victory. Now, however, back on their ships, the Persians sensed opportunity. They realized that the city of Athens was likely, at this moment, totally defenseless. They could immediately sail south and west towards the city, intent on burning it down before their defenders could return overland to reach it. It is here that the legend of Marathon is born. Knowing that if a Persian fleet arrived, uncertain as to the fate of their army, the pro-Persian faction would be able to wrestle control of the city and surrender. The runner, Phidippides, ran the 42 kilometers towards the city non-stop, sent to tell the city of their victory over Persia. Upon arriving and relaying this news, he collapsed and died. When the Persians arrived, they found the city walls manned and ready for battle. All that remained was for them to return home, bringing news of their defeat to their king. With this victory, Athens would survive. It really is hard to say what would have happened if the city had fallen then and there. Would this new experiment that the Athenians had just started with the process known as democracy died with them? It's likely too hard to say. So too maybe would their culture and values. The Persians would come back, however, angry, seeking revenge once more, only 10 years later. Indeed, it would be in this next invasion that the famous Battle of Thermopylae against the Spartans and the 300 would play out. In that war, Athens would be sacked, but its people would survive, having been evacuated safely. The Greeks would go on to win that war and eventually conquer and destroy that very same empire, spreading their own Hellenic influence across half the globe in the wake of their conquests, under a man known as Alexander. Well, if you made it this far, I hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you wish to see more like this, or if you have some suggestions on future episodes, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. And also, what are your thoughts on the Battle of Marathon and the way that Greek influences spread around the modern world? If you wish to see more of my channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. All the usual stuff. It really helps grow the channel and is greatly appreciated. Stay tuned for more episodes, and until then, stay safe and be kind.